This is the OnePlus 15R Disassembly. If you're interested in seeing more videos like this, make sure you subscribe and click on the notification bell so you'll be notified once I upload a new video. Also, if you need any tools, there are links in the description. We'll start off by removing the SIM tray. Looking at the SIM tray, we can see a black rubber gasket around the opening. At this point, heat needs to be applied to the back plate using either a hairdryer or a heat gun to loosen up the adhesive underneath, and then a pry tool can be used to pry the back plate off. I prefer to use a hairdryer since there's less of a chance of damaging any of the components inside by overheating them. Here's a better look at the glass backplate. The glass camera lens cover can be replaced by applying heat and prying it off, so you don't have to take apart the phone to replace that. But if you are planning on replacing the camera bezel, there are 4 Phillips screws on the other side which need to be removed. There is also an antenna built into the camera bezel, which makes contact with the main board via these gold contacts. There's also graphite film to help transfer heat. There are now 17 Phillips screws which need to be removed. Taking a look at the top plastic motherboard cover, we see the NFC antenna, the infrared or IR blaster, the rear ambient light sensor, as well as the LED flash located below that. There's also graphite film to help transfer heat. Here's a look at the other side. There are 2 strips of graphite film and copper tape which need to be peeled back before we can disconnect the battery cables. When it comes to prying off the battery, there's a pull pouch provided to help you pry it off. This is the 7400 mAh dual cell battery, and this battery has a 15% silicon content inside its anode. This is the 32 megapixel front-facing camera. There's a single Phillips screw which is holding down the main board. Taking a look at the main board, we see the 50 megapixel main camera with a Sony IMX906 sensor, as well as an 8 megapixel ultra-wide lens. The camera connectors can be disconnected by just popping them off. There's a secondary microphone on the top corner, and rubber gaskets around the battery connectors. There's also graphite film and copper tape over the front shield to help transfer heat. Looking at the other side, we see the proximity and ambient light sensor, as well as additional graphite film and thermal paste or thermal compound on the back shield to help transfer heat. Once the graphite film has been peeled back, we see a generous amount of thermal paste on top of the RAM, which is seated over the Snapdragon 8 Gen 5 processor. There's additional thermal paste on these chips, and a thermal pad over the ROM or onboard storage. Here's a better look with the thermal paste and thermal pad removed. Once the bottom cover has been removed, we see the flex cable for the screen, which is connected to an extension cable, which leads to the main board. So if you needed to replace the screen, you'd have to remove the back plate, the screws on the bottom cover and the cover itself. You would then have to disconnect the screen flex cable, as well as the rest of the cables on the subboard, and remove the subboard itself, giving you access to removing the screen cable, at which point you would heat up the front of the phone where the screen is to loosen up the adhesive underneath, pry the old screen off, apply new adhesive, and reapply the new screen, making sure you run the flex cable back to the opening in the midframe, and reassemble the phone. Taking a look at the subboard, we see rubber gaskets around these connectors, as well as a red rubber gasket around the charger port. The primary microphone is located underneath this covered shield. The SIM reader is located on the other side. This is the bottom speaker assembly. There's a rubber gasket and mesh filter over the speaker opening on the frame, as well as the microphone openings. So on this phone, if you're to accidentally insert a SIM ejector tool in the wrong hole, you won't need to worry since both the filters and the microphones are seated above the holes and they wouldn't get damaged. The vibrator or haptic feedback motor is located here, which is held down with some adhesive, and the same goes for the earpiece speaker located on top. So if you needed to replace either of those, just apply some heat and gently pry them off. Once the flex cables have been peeled back, we have a better look at the large vapor chamber which runs underneath the battery, as well as the motherboard. This is the flex cable for the power button, and this one is for the volume keys. To replace those, just gently peel them off the frame, and pull out the black plastic pieces inside of the slit of the frame. You're probably going to have to use a thin tool like a razor blade or an X-Acto knife to pull those out. As for replacing or removing the buttons, there are some plastic inserts inside these cutouts in the frame, which would need to be pulled out to release those buttons. The same goes for the button on the other side. For the repairability score on this phone, I give it an 8.5 out of 10. Now it's time to put the phone back together. Once everything's back in place, apply new adhesive and reapply the back cover. Flip over the phone, power it on, and you're done. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.